So, long confined to local or sector-specific initiative, reuse is now entering a new era, that of large-scale industrial structuring. This is the ambition of the shared reuse loop, deployed in 4 pilot regions under the impetus of Citeo. This experiment of unprecedented scale, with 16 million consumers concerned in the west and north of France, marks a decisive step towards the generalization of a national reuse model complementary to single use. During this webinar, Go RÉEMPLOI, operator of this shared system, will present it. I am joined by its co-founders, including Florence Duriez of Ola Consigne and co-founder of Go RÉEMPLOI. Hello. Hello, Florence, welcome. Olivier Le Fall, who is the Green Supply Chain Manager at Conserver and co-founder of RÉEMPLOI. Hello, Olivier. Hello, everyone. And Fabrice Pelletier, co-founder and president of Go. Hello, Fabrice. Chantal Delamotte is also with us, director of the All for Pack Emballage Paris Trade Show. Hello, Chantal. Hello, everyone. Chantal, before we get to our speakers, I have a question. Why did you choose reuse as the theme for this webinar series organized by the trade show? Well, as you know, the Emballage Paris Trade Show is very, very interested in the entire packaging ecosystem. Packaging is essential for all industries to provide quality products. It is tailored to the product and used at every stage: production, packaging, storage, and delivery. In fact, it is undergoing a real transformation, with a renewed focus on its primary function, of course, but also a desire to enter a virtuous cycle whenever possible. Right now, we are witnessing a real transformation, and everyone agrees on the need to use packaging in a useful and responsible way, especially the consumer. So among all the approaches that have been implemented to reduce its environmental impact, reuse holds a very important place, and putting it into practice is a topic that concerns us all. The change is considerable in the organization of the current supply chain, which is why this is the theme for this webinar, managed by All for Pack Emballage Paris. Well, let's dive right into this topic, this transformation. Over the next 45 minutes, we will talk about the context, the reuse of packaging, the activation of 4 regions led by Citeo, the presentation of Go RÉEMPLOI, but also the scope of action of Go. So without further delay, let's get right to it. But let me remind you that you can ask your questions throughout this webinar in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we will make sure to answer your questions. So Fabrice, I suggest we dive right into the topic, but above all, could you tell us about the regulatory context and in particular the environment in which packaging reuse is developing?
Thank you for that clear introduction. Yes, indeed, the context stand, as Chantal pointed out, there really is a regulatory framework that began with the anti-waste law for a circular economy, the AGEC law, and the PPWR regulation, which, by the way, some people sometimes see as being at odds with each other, but in reality, they are not opposed. I would say they are complementary. Just to remind everyone, the AGEC law aims for a reduction in single-use plastic packaging by the end of 2025, that is, by the end of this year, be 20%, and at least half of that reduction must be achieved through reuse. 10% of packaging must be reusable by 2027. We had a target of 5% that we were supposed to reach, but it has not been achieved, since studies show that we have not yet met this goal. The target of 10% by 2027 is extremely ambitious, and we have to achieve it.
And then there is this, some people see it as a scarecrow.
Personally, I see it as a goal to reach, in any case, a dream. It's this 100% reduction of single-use packaging, single-use plastic packaging by 2040. And it is clear that this reduction, up to the near elimination of single-use packaging, so for some plastic, for certain markets, and I want to stress, not for all markets, well, it can only happen if economically and environmentally viable reuse solutions are implemented. Then you have the PPWR regulation, which has established the obligation for distributors, meaning those who are responsible for placing alcoholic as well as non-alcoholic beverages on the market, to take back packaging from consumers. This is really something quite fundamental and important, because today the stores where you do your shopping are actually required by law to take back packaging whenever a reuse system is in place. We have other objectives. We're not talking about the same numbers, you see. In any case, let's not pit these numbers against each other, and let's not say that these figures will cancel each other out. I see it more as more than just a lasting trend. That is to say, it's more like a comprehensive roadmap, regardless of the numbers or statistics or societies, communities, and populations are steadily moving toward a massive and significant return to reuse, aiming to reduce single-use items and disposable products whenever it becomes feasible, both from an industrial, ecological, and economic perspective. So the path is set, and these numbers will change over time, just as recycling targets have evolved since 1992 when we put all this in place.
Thank you, Fabrice. So in this context, we also have consumer expectations that are becoming more pronounced.
Now, this is where it gets interesting. Because, in fact, there really is, it's self-reported, but there is indeed a strong push from consumers, and in any case, an appetite, an interest in reuse according to what they declare. Reuse of packaging is spontaneously mentioned by 24% as a way to consume better, to consume more responsibly, since everyone is faced with coming back from shopping and managing their packaging at the end of its life. At the end of its life, packaging has to be dealt with somehow either disposed of, put in recycling bins, or reused. Consumers believe that reuse is a virtuous practice. We also see it's not surprising that consumers feel the options for reuse are insufficient. There aren't enough. It's starting to happen, but there still aren't enough options. This is according to the Opsoco Observatory. And then when it comes to intention, indeed, between intention and effect and reality, how I wish those 77% of intentions would become reality. But in terms of intention, from the moment 10, I'll put this in quotation marks, as we'll see in a moment, when the consumer journey, when things are made easier, in terms of intention, 77% of consumers say they are ready to practice reuse if an option were available in their usual store, and of course, if everything could be done simply. In other words, if we make consumers' lives easier, they are willing to engage in reuse. And this actually correlates very closely with studies you've already conducted at All4Pack, where we can clearly see that consumers often have their left brain and right brain clashing when it comes to packaging decisions, because on the one hand, they want less packaging, more environmentally friendly and sustainable packaging, or even in some cases, no packaging at all. And on the other hand, at the same time, they demand packaging that is practical, easy to open, easy to close, easy to use, and easy to dispose of at the end of its life. So what the consumer wants is quality packaged products in practical packaging that they can easily manage at the end of its life. Reuse fits perfectly into this trend.
I have another question. Why reuse packaging after all?
Why repackage? Wait, I'm trying to change the slide. Why use reusable packaging? Here, so here are now studies that no longer lie, studies that have been conducted by ADIM and Citeo. What is certain, if you will, and here, well, a reuse package that is a package that can be used up to 50 times for the same glass container represents a significant reduction in the resources needed to manufacture the packaging. Because if you use it 50 times, you don't have to remake it 50 times. So resources in terms of energy, and it also allows for certain materials, since, as we've seen with what happened in Iraq, the Strait of Hormuz were seeing the prices of raw materials skyrocket again. We're not immune to shortages of one thing or another. Reusable packaging is a form of sovereignty for packaging, ultimately, because it won't be affected by market fluctuations since it already exists and doesn't need to be remanufactured each time. So that's a first point, with the preservation of about 75% of energy compared to single-use packaging made from the same materials. It's obvious. The PPWR regulation, let me remind you, is aimed at waste prevention. Reusable packaging means that each time a piece of packaging waste, or at least part of it, is avoided, it only becomes waste at the end of the packaging's life, because this packaging can be reused multiple times, but the practice will be different in that the waste status of this packaging will be determined more by the service provider, by the industrial sorting and washing operators, than by the consumer. So we can be pretty sure that this packaging, at least in the reuse practices that will be implemented, this packaging that will eventually become waste, will go to recycling 100% of the time. And then comprehensive environmental studies and detailed life cycle analyses, which have been carefully carried out by both ADEME and Citeo, show that from the second or even the fourth use, there is a clear and systematic advantage for returnable glass packaging, especially when compared to a single-use glass packaging. This isn't necessarily true for all materials, since the lighter the packaging, the more difficult it may be to achieve better carbon performance. But on the other hand, when it comes to waste impact and pressure on resources, there's simply no comparison. Now,
I already have some questions. We have a lot of questions, but I'll try to ask one that relates to what you just said, which is, how do you count the 58 reuse cycles of the packaging? And another question is, aside from glass, are there other materials that can be reused?
The 50 uses, that's theoretical. It's based on averages observed in Germany and in the hospitality sector, cafes, hotels, restaurants. Now, a package might not be reusable after just the second use, or it could last for more than 50 uses. We're not going to keep track of how many cycles a package goes through. It's an average, but theoretically, in most cases, it is generally usable. For example, this week I was with people from the hospitality sector, Burger King and KFC, who are now using tableware, and soon we'll see other materials like plastic being used. So then the plastic packaging, the cups they have, for example, after sorting, were rated for about 300 uses. Now they realize that they're far exceeding that number. So there isn't a set rule. It's all theoretical. As for the materials, today you'll see that we're starting with glass for this rollout, but there will also be other materials coming, like plastics and stainless steel. There are quite a few developments, especially in the standards currently being worked on with Citeo. I just want to add one point that's often raised against reuse. There are two arguments that are brought up against reuse. The first argument is, yes, but you're making the packaging travel empty for many kilometers. You see in the presentation later, Florence and Olivier will show you that these kilometers are actually quite limited. And let's never forget, as someone who is an elected member of the board of a SICTOM, the glass packaging I collect in my Molochs and bring to my SICTOM doesn't just fly from my SICTOM to the recycling center on its own wings. They also travel many kilometers to reach the recycling center. And in fact, some of them travel much farther than our reusable packaging ever will. And furthermore, people also argue against reuse by bringing up water usage. But reuse actually uses less water, 33% less, according to study stand, what is used in recycling. Recycling uses water. So there are real advantages to reusing. When it's possible, it's not always possible, not for every product, and only when there's obviously an economic benefit to doing so. The environmental benefit, however, is present in most cases.
Very well. Let's move on. We'll take more questions later. And now I'd like to suggest we talk about the practice of reuse.
The practice of reuse, as I mentioned once again, whether it's at Go RÉEMPLOI, it's not just because we have reuse written behind us. We absolutely do not set reuse practices against single-use ones. On the contrary, quite the opposite, in fact, at Go RÉEMPLOI, and also with what has been done with Citeo, we are convinced that these two practices will coexist both industrially and in stores, and they will only exist where it makes sense. To be brief, there are several reuse practices. We identified them, and there are four. There is the reuse practice by the consumer, which is refilling with all the refill options that are currently being developed. You also have reuse practices like bulk purchasing, where the consumer brings their own packaging or container to a store and serves themselves from bulk bins. And there are two reuse practices that might seem a bit more industrial. The first one on the right involves machines that are currently being developed, for example, dispensers or coffee machines, which will precisely give you the exact amount of product that you want from a machine. And then there is industrial reuse, and that's the one we're going to talk about, where a reusable package is used by a manufacturer or distributor to package their product. In fact, it's the same job as what they do with single-use packaging, except now they're doing it with reusable packaging, which is put on the market with a deposit. This packaging will come back, be collected, sorted, cleaned, checked, and then returned to them or to another distributor who will use the same packaging to refill it again. There are three types. Today, we distinguish three types of reusable packaging. You have these standard ones, which I remind you are a requirement of the EJEC law, which asked the eco-organizations, in this case, Citeo took on the task to develop a range of standard packaging. What is a standard packaging? It is packaging designed to be used by one producer, collected, and then sent to another producer who puts the same type of product in it, or even a different one for that matter. That means, for example, if you look at the freshness jar, you can put apple juice in it, orange juice, or even fish soup or milk. Obviously, a beer bottle is just for beer. These standard packages are recognizable by their Archer symbol and the reusable element. But among reusable packaging, it's not just these. There are also what we call the iconic ones. The iconic ones are branded packaging, like the Desperado or Loina bottle or the sparkling Café Paris bottle. But they can also be company standards. For example, the Badois bottle and the Evian bottle are the same bottles. They belong to the same group, the same company, Danone, but they will be used sometimes for Badois, sometimes for Evian, depending on where they come from. And then you have what are called RVR standards. So RVR stands for Bulk and Reuse Network. To begin with, since you mentioned it earlier as well, reuse didn't start yesterday, and it doesn't start with Go RÉEMPLOI with us. There have been quite a few initiatives, and you will see experimental initiatives that have been carried out. And there are also loops that are already running, local loops. There are a number of packaging types that have been used, some that were already classified as reusable, like beer bottles, for example, and others that were chosen by default because they were a bit sturdier, such as slightly heavier wine bottles that can be used for reuse. Gradually, as Aircare packaging is developed, these will be replaced by these standard Aircare containers. Because developing reusable packaging takes a long time, it's a lengthy process, and we're developing them little by little.
I designed these packages, and I have many others in progress that will also take time to become available. Fabrice, we have a lot of questions. We'll try to answer one or two of them.
We are currently using recyclable plastic bags. Is there any benefit to switching to reusable glass packaging, which is heavier?
Well, first, what are you using these recyclable plastic bags for? I have no idea. So I can't answer that, because let me remind you, we don't wake up in the morning just to make packaging, we make packaged products. So actually there are already several criteria that will determine whether we go for reuse. The first criterion is what we put inside. Is it worth doing it? Are these fast-moving products, are these products suitable for reuse? Are these products that can be put in bottles or jars? It's the product that determines the packaging, not the other way around, not the packaging that determines the product. So I don't really know how to answer that question. I think that
Maybe we can clarify in the chat. There's another question about the paper shopping bag sold at the checkout. Is it considered reusable?
the paper shopping bag sold at the checkout, I don't think so.
Made of PP.
The bags, the shopping bags we have, they are considered reusable. They've been reusable for a long time, actually. It's been a long time since. In any case, I have some and I reuse them. So yes, they're reusable bags and they have a system. By the way, when you feel they're no longer of very good quality, you bring them back and the retailer exchanges it for a new one. But that's not part of it's something that's been around for a long time. And yes, to me, they are reusable. Now, are they counted as reuse? No, I don't think so. That needs to be checked. So yes, I'll check on that.
Very well. We're going to move on to the activation in 4 regions, which is notably led by Citeo. Florence, could you please elaborate and tell us a bit more about this important support, especially this process of scaling up in order to achieve successful industrial food reuse?
With pleasure. The activation of reuse in 4 regions is the largest experiment, and we hope a preview of what will happen in the coming years across France. It really is the largest experiment ever implemented. Why is that? Because it involved 4 regions that you can see on the map: Pays de la Loire, Brittany, Normandy, and Hauts-de-France. These 4 regions have a combined population of 16 million inhabitants, so this is by no means insignificant. In these 4 regions, we expect between 750 and 100 retail outlets from major supermarket chains or specialized distributors, including most of today's major retail brands. We will find Système U, we will find Les Mousquetaires, Carrefour, Auchan. They were mentioned on the previous slide. You'll also find, and I hope we didn't forget Monoprix, there's also Biocop. There were 2 or 3 other pieces of information on the previous slide. If someone... Is that you, Fabrice? I haven't seen it again. Thank you. It hadn't reached me yet. I hadn't addressed the 3rd point. So 750 stores across 4 regions, launched in just a few months, that's quite an achievement. And above all, we're expecting up to millions of packages put on the market per year, with potentially up to 80 different packaging formats. 80 packaging formats compared to what Fabrice presented to you earlier. That's every RCUR format we talked about, every RVR format. Today there are about 20... And all the iconic formats we might have, some of them have already been rolled out in the activation. And we've currently limited this number to 80 with Citeo. Citeo is limited to 80 different packaging types, the potential in this activation. Millions of packages, that's unprecedented. We've never had an experiment on this scale, no expectations at this level. Today, there are many local sectors, and we're part of that. For the largest ones, we go up to 3 million, which is already significant, but we never reach this kind of figure. So really, this is the biggest experiment. And this was made possible by 2 years of work led by Citeo, together with all the retailers and all the producers. So it's been a massive project management effort over the past 2 years. We at RÉEMPLOI were chosen as the service provider to operate the entire reverse logistics loop and to supply the RCUR packaging. We'll come back to that in just a moment. And so to actually run this entire experiment over the first 18 months, from now until the end of 2026.
Very well. The 50 million over what time frame?
Actually, it's per year. It's for this experiment.
Perfect. Thank you for answering the question. We're going to talk about the companies involved in this regional activation, Olivier Lefol. Which ones are they?
Well, we have several marketers who are supporting us. We have many marketers working with us on this activation, especially in the range of food products. As you can see, we are supported by people we already know well. I'm talking about Andros, Bioplanet, Danival, Le Fourgon, with whom we've already been working for many years. For food products, we're mainly dealing with pots. with freshness bottles. So the pots will come in the second phase, mainly at the beginning of 2026 for some, but for others, like the jugs I'm talking about, Jardin de l'Aubry or the fish soups from Délices de la Mer, it's already on the way. So we're already right in the middle of the activation. As for non-alcoholic beverages, Florence has already talked about it, and so has Fabrice. It's mainly mineral waters, mainly juices. So here we're mostly talking about freshness bottles. We've already communicated a lot about this. When it comes to alcoholic beverages, it's true that we are focusing on beer. We are lucky to have a lot of breweries, microbreweries in Brittany and in Hauts-de-France. So these are distributors that we already know very well because either through local loops, we already work with them, or for single-use products. And we're also fortunate to work with them in that context. So we're not starting from scratch. We're not venturing into the unknown. These are people we know very well and whom we will support throughout the activation process to ensure everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you very much for your attention. We can now take a short break since we have quite a lot of questions to address before we begin to talk in detail about Go Réemploi. Regarding the questions, I would like to clarify, are the reuse targets also applicable in the B2B model industry, regardless of the specific sector or field involved?
Same thing. I don't really know if they are. There are reuse targets in B2B, but I don't know if they can be consolidated with those of B2C. So I'll take the.
In any case, the figures presented are indeed B2C figures.
For us, our figures are B2C figures indeed. Beyond that, I don't know what the B2B targets are. And what is important, if you like, perhaps in the question, is that in the reuse objectives, we also have secondary packaging and tertiary packaging, which are included in it. It's not just primary packaging.
I also have a question, which is how to comply with the legislation when we are not in these 4 regions.
Maybe a clarification for suppliers. Suppliers can be located throughout France. They are under no obligation to be in the 4 regions. It's the stores, in other words, the distribution that are in the 4 regions. So any supplier who wants to participate is welcome to join us. For those who are involved in local loops and therefore do not sell in these regions, there are local reuse loops all over France. There is the France Consigne Association, for example, which brings together local operators. There are other loops as well, and these are not the only ones. There are other reuse loops you can join. Generally, at first, there are often studies to be conducted, and many operators like Go Réemploi can support you with this study phase on packaging, specifically to see how to transition to reuse.
Absolutely. Just to add to what Florence said, you'll see it later in Massy's presentation, but we deliver air care packaging all over France. That is to say, the logos, all the different logos that you saw, the companies, you have them in the south, in the east, in the north, they're everywhere. Most of them are not Breton companies.
Very well. We have a slightly more concrete question. Where should glass bottles be returned in a container? Is there a risk of breakage?
We'll talk about that in a moment.
We'll discuss it right after.
We'll talk about it later. We're going to show you the entire process, and you'll see how everything is collected indeed.
Very well. Florence, I'd like to invite you to tell us about Go Réemploi, a service provider that will operate this reuse loop, but will use packaging from the activation of 4 networks. Okay, very good.
So Go Réemploi is a collective of experts. First, maybe to properly introduce who Go Réemploi is, it's 5 companies that have come together to create Go Réemploi and ultimately bring together all the expertise required for a reverse loop for returning packaging. Among these founders, you have the Massili Group, represented here by Olivier, which is currently a packaging distributor, and as we'll see in the loop, will help us manage all the deliveries. You have the company Bocoloco, which manages the traceability tool that we'll be discussing. You have the companies Butabou and Hola Consigne, which are the sorting and washing operators. And you have Fabrice, who is both the initiator of these standard packaging solutions and the founder of Go Réemploi.
So I think we can move on to the next part. We're going to talk about the scope of action of Go Réemploi. Olivier, I'd like you to tell us about the contracting, the training, and the storage. I'll hand it over to you.
All right, let's try to keep it simple. So you have the complete diagram of the operational loop for reuse. Everything obviously starts with the manufacturing of the packaging by glass industry manufacturers based in France. So we receive the entire packaging inventory in our warehouses. So this represents a very significant volume at the outset. We deliver to the market suppliers throughout the entire country, just as Florence and Fabrice mentioned, to enable them to package their products. So indeed, this could be in the south, in the east, in the southwest, it doesn't matter. The producers then manufacture and deliver to the purchasing centers so that the packaged products can then go directly to the stores. So after that, we have the act of consumption with the end consumer, and then the deposit and return process. Since the consumer brings back all the empty packaging to the return machines that will be located in the stores. So there are different types of return machines depending on the size, and the deposit is refunded at that moment, either as a store voucher or as a credit card reimbursement. We are then responsible for collecting the packaging, which will be placed in large plastic crates called pallocks. We collect them from each store. So it's a real logistical operation since we're talking about more than 750 stores. So we collect them, we deliver empty packaging in their place, we consolidate them, and then we send them to the washing and sorting centers, either to Eau La Consigne with Florence or to Bou near Nantes. The packaging is sorted carefully, washed thoroughly, and reconditioned to be exactly like when it left the glass factories. And we collect them to put them back into our supply chain to fully reintegrate them into the loop, and the loop is closed.
Perfect. So who does what?
So actually, who does what? So Florence introduced you earlier to the 5 stakeholders of Go RÉEMPLOI. So here, it's mainly about presenting the gear tool, if I may, on this slide, regarding who does what. So the gear tool is actually the traceability tool that will really allow us at each stage to clearly see who does what in the workflow of these companies. But the main thing to keep in mind is that everything will be tracked, and this will allow us to learn. And of course, this is something Citeo has requested to learn from this experiment. So we can fix anything that needs to be fixed and then roll it out nationwide. So in the gear tool, this tool will bring together both all the information intended for the stores, including training and support, but also all the truly traceable data. So the collection of packaging, once it is in the machines, which we call RVMs, once it is collected, when it arrives at the sorting centers, once it is sorted, when it is stored, you will then have a set of data once it is washed, palletized, the storage that is ongoing, the storage that is being shipped. And then we will also have the traceability of everything we manage as new parts, especially for the Arker, since we deliver them in bulk, delivering them new to our clients. And so this reception, this storage, this delivery will also be tracked in our gear tool, which is really the core of the system. And what Florence points out is important, if you will, because I hear the same thing. We read a lot. People talk about returning to the old deposit system. What I remind people is that when the old deposit system stopped, we didn't even have computers in our companies. So this return to the deposit system, we can indeed talk about a return to the deposit system, but we are in the 21st century now with digital tools, digital platforms. And in fact, as you will certainly see as we continue to go along, it actually has very little to do with what was ultimately stopped in the 70s.
Very well. So we're going to talk about the management of the standard Arker packaging, reception, conformity control, and storage. So Olivier.
Yes, thank you. So here you have a small map where you can see all our locations nationwide for our storage platforms, especially for conservers. All this is to say that we have a strong presence across the national territory and that we cover the entire activation area. So that's actually very important in order to have the lowest possible carbon footprint for delivery and collection. Our main goal is indeed to anticipate all the needs and requirements of the market players, either by supplying new bottles whenever necessary and by collecting the washed bottles, ensuring that every step of the process is as efficient and sustainable as possible. So we have to bring all of this together to ensure zero stockouts, which is already very important to guarantee the continuity of operations throughout the entire cycle. So there we are. We are up and running. We are ready to go, and we are truly here to support the market suppliers.
I suggest we now talk about contracting with these suppliers.
So the contract.
Please, go ahead.
The contracting process. So we have indeed provided a pricing schedule that is unique, valid for all market players at fixed rate for the entire duration of the activation. We have a set of technical specifications that allows us to determine the suitability of a primary packaging for reuse within reuse. This is very important. All the end-to-end teams at HoloConsign have done an exceptional job of synthesizing all this. And we are here to support the market players and to qualify their packaging so that the washing process goes as smoothly as possible. So this is a very, very important point to ensure that we really have no issues in this regard. And finally, we will formalize all the terms, whether financial or qualitative, between RÉEMPLOI and the market players through a contract, and we are working on it.
Very good. Florence, could you tell us about how this contracting process works, especially with each store, and also talk to us about the support provided?
With pleasure. Indeed, we have a contract between RÉEMPLOI and the retail chains, and then the same contract is adapted for each individual store. What's essential after the contract is signed is that for us, the main issue is really making sure it's actually implemented in the store, that we see the communication, as you can see on the slide, the in-aisle communication that identifies the products and that the kiosk is available and working. These are really the store's commitments. On our end, we will come and explain the entire return loop to the store, providing both remote training and in-store diagnostic visits. We'll explain the IT tools that need to be used, the communication materials that are available and how to implement them, and how the kiosk operates. We have 3 types of kiosks. Each store has its own kiosk. And we plan to have at least 3 check-ins during the first few months for each store to make sure everything is really going well. Additionally, as I mentioned regarding the traceability tool, we'll be able to monitor how things are running in each store and check in if we notice that some stores aren't performing as well, or if there are stoppages, to ensure the process keeps going and there's no interruption of service for the customer.
Very well. All of this also involves, as we mentioned a bit earlier, encouraging the consumer. How do you specifically help them take part in these initiatives?
Sorry, excuse me. I lost my train of thought because I was looking at a comment at the same time. Could you please repeat that question for me?
I was talking about encouraging the consumer, especially how do you help them take part in actions that promote this engagement?
Okay, the client, the end consumer, that's really all the work that has actually been carried out by Citeo. All the communication you see here, the entire graphic charter, that's Citeo. This graphic charter deserves to be uniform across all stores and distributors with its purple and orange colors. You'll find the same thing whether you go to an Intermarché or a Leclerc. This communication is also planned for packaging and is mandatory, for example, on standard Aker packaging. You'll find the little logo, "Return me for reuse," which serves as a reminder of what's already written on the bottle, on the glass where it's embossed, reusable, and which really helps remind the end customer at home that this bottle is indeed the one they can bring back. It's also important to make sorting at home easier and to know that this can be returned to get your deposit back. The other major motivation for the customer is that these products are subject to a deposit. They are subject to a deposit, which means the customer has paid an extra 10, 20, maybe 50 cents. And so they want them back. To do so, they need to go to the machine to return their packaging. What also makes things easier is that the customer has the choice of either receiving a voucher for their next shopping trip in the store or being reimbursed to their credit card. This is really easier and creates better trust for the customer since it's their deposit and they can do whatever they want with it. And finally, there is the Treatment logo to be affixed to reusable packaging, which is mandatory on all reusable packaging and also provides a way for the customer to verify what they can return.
Another important point, which we may not have emphasized yet and which is a unique feature of the system, is that it is interoperable. That's also why you see the same point of sale displays, the same colors in all the stores and on the machines. Since you can buy something at a Carrefour or a System U and return it to another participating store like an Intermarché, there is no requirement for the consumer to return their packaging to the exact place where they bought it. That means the lady who is putting her packaging into the machines will be the same, or at least the same color in all the stores. And she can return it to whichever store she wants, wherever she happens to be. That's important. That's also what makes this initiative unique. It's the first time we've had interoperability for packaging returns and deposits.
Florence, you also wanted to discuss returns in more detail, but also deconsignment and in-store collection.
Yes, absolutely. And that answers a question we got in the chat that asked about the capacity of the machines. The capacity of the machines is roughly between 200 and 10 packages per machine, depending on the size of the machine and the size of the packaging. The 10 figure is if we only collect 33 centiliter bottles, for example. And what's important is that it's also very easy for the store to manage, and that too is important. In addition to the end customer, it also needs to be simplified and easy to use for the stores. So as you can see, there will be plastic bins placed inside the machines. And when it is full, the store receives the information digitally. That is, they can see it with small indicator lights on the machine and they get alerts when it is full. They simply have to swap out the Flux plastic bin with another one using a pallet jack. There is no other handling required. When it is full, Go RÉEMPLOI schedules a pickup and we come to collect it. That's how it works with the machine. We haven't mentioned it yet, but smaller stores will be equipped with a barcode scanner at checkout or at the reception desk. And in that case, the items will go into purple shuttle bins, as you can see. So in those cases, we will come to collect the shuttle bins, and in the same way, they are exchanged at that time. When we come to pick up the Palox containers, we first fill our truck with empty Palox so that we can distribute them each time. Then we collect all the full Palox and bring them to the two sorting and consolidation centers. The two centers are those of Ola Consigne, Boutabou, so Ola Consigne in the north and Boutabou near Nantes. And as for the distribution, in the end, we will deliver to the stores closest to these two locations, since ultimately that's always what sets the rules, being as close as possible.
Well, thank you.
So we remain within a collection radius of 250 kilometers for this return phase.
Perfect. There's also an important point, which is sorting, washing, and inspection. There's also palletization and return for reuse.
Could you tell us about the operational management of sorting and washing?
Yes, of course.
As I mentioned earlier, we could have up to 80 different types of packaging. This means that in practice, during sorting, we could have 80 sorting stations to separate up to 80 types of packaging. We'll have packaging like the Arke type, where several breweries might use the same Arke beer bottle, and perhaps even for cider. You'll have Arke freshness packaging. As Fabrice mentioned, you'll have juice, you'll have soup. You could even imagine having milk and other products, always food items. And so those will be together, sorted by packaging. And then you'll have the iconic packaging, and each of those will have its own spot. So at first, this is largely done manually in both sorting and washing centers, because we need to handle really large volumes before we can automate these steps. Once this sorting is done and we have enough of the same type of packaging, we can start the washing process. And here, the two washing centers that work with Go RÉEMPLOI are washing centers that have won a Citeo washing call for projects. And so they have demonstrated a level of industrialization that is the ability to wash at least 6,000 bottles an hour and a sufficient quality level to start these loops. That's the first point. It's an immersion washing process. That means the bottles are first rinsed. Next, they are given an 80-degree bath with caustic soda, which thoroughly cleans the bottle and removes the label. Then they are rinsed in successive rinse baths. The next steps for the bottles, which are just as important, are that these bottles are blown dry and inspected. So inspected means that there is an electronic scanner with more than a dozen cameras that examines the bottle from the neck, the sides, to the bottom to check that there are no chips, no leftover labels, and no food residue inside. At the end, the bottles are palletized on glassmakers' racks, just like new ones. And as Olivier mentioned earlier, they are sent back to the suppliers. Perfect.
We have only a few minutes left now to talk about ultimately the rollout of reusable packaging on a national scale. Fabrice, could you share a word on this point?
You see, Go RÉEMPLOI and this initiative have set out, I would say, to crack the model and to develop a model that can be rolled out nationally as soon as the initiative is complete. What would this national model look like? We're talking about 2 billion reusable packages in the long run, of which 67% are standard formats. You see, we're starting at 55 million. There's still quite a way to go. We're talking about 7,000 machines, 18,000 recovery devices, so 18,000 collection points compared to our 750 or 1,100 stores. It's really a matter of scale. We're also talking in France, even though in Germany and the Nordic countries, it's a bit higher, about an 85% return rate for reusable packaging in the long run. And then we showed you 200 washing facilities, but with the shared system, we would actually have 26 washing centers all across France, which would allow us to cover the country, specifically with those 200 to 250 kilometers throughout France, so that the packaging can be collected and washed as close as possible to where it was picked up, and then redistributed to producers who are much closer by. So as you can clearly see, there's still quite a way to go before completion, but this particular implementation is gradually shaping and refining the model.
Okay, perfect. Now let's take a few questions. We have some very practical questions about labels. Are there any constraints on labels to make washing easier? What are the requirements regarding adhesives used on product labels?
I'd be happy to take those questions and add one more point on another question where I was asked if it could be washed at Option Solution. And I forgot to mention that in our process, I talked up to the washing stage. The standard Arca packaging must be washed by Go RÉEMPLOI and therefore by the washers who use immersion washing, who are Citeo awardees and have been selected by Go RÉEMPLOI. So here we're talking about eau la consigne and bout à bout. On the other hand, marketers of iconic packaging can stop at the sorting stage and retrieve their packaging and wash them wherever they want. At that point, it is their choice. That was just to... for us, we can stop at sorting or go all the way to washing. It also depends on the packaging. Regarding the label and glue, Olivier mentioned the technical specifications grid. We actually guide you on those aspects. Indeed, you need to have specific labels and specific glue that are suitable for reuse and can withstand immersion washing. So the packaging that enters the reuse system must necessarily meet fairly strict requirements. Citeo has written a usage guide for labels, which you can get from them. And then, we come to check that you are compliant. And if you're not, we can also offer you assistance to help you become compliant in that area. And of course, we can advise you beforehand if you're just getting started. I really encourage you to get in touch with the Go RÉEMPLOI customer teams at your earliest convenience. So you don't have to wait until the last minute. And also the Go RÉEMPLOI teams conduct tests and offer you washability tests before you actually get started, before you launch.
You'll also be able to answer the questions that have been asked by others, especially in order to continue and further enrich the discussion. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Chantal to help us wrap up this informative webinar. Chantal, will we be meeting again in the future, especially after the summer break, perhaps for another session?
Absolutely, and I especially hope that this session has helped you better understand the challenges behind the implementation of reusable packaging. We've seen how it's being approached on an industrial scale in France, but it's clear that there's also European demand. I hope we've answered some of your many questions and provided food for thought for your future actions. And likewise, we will indeed be holding many more sessions starting in September. And above all, we'll see each other again starting from November 24th, 2026 in Villepinte.
Very well. So please feel free to scan the QR code displayed to stay informed about the latest news. Thank you all very much for your participation and your invaluable insights. There were so many of you following us. So a big thank you to each and every one of you.